Hey y'all, welcome to Brianna Approved, a podcast for people who like a holistic approach to real science and clinical research on all things nutrition, botanicals, and balance. I'm your host, Brianna DiOrio, clinical nutritionist, herbal practitioner, and recovering super spaz. Hey y'all, welcome to my first episode of the Brianna Approved podcast. This has been a long time coming. I am very excited to finally be doing this. I've been fortunate enough to have been on many podcasts, and I've gotten asked a lot of questions over the years if I would ever do this, and I never really thought it was something for me, but being a resident nerd and loving all things research, but also getting to the truth of objective science, I felt like it was finally time. So this is a lifestyle podcast. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about, health and nutrition, botanicals. I'm a big proponent of trying to have balance during all of this. But of course, I am your resident super spaz. So we're going to pepper some of that in as well. And my hope for this podcast is going to be basically to marry together my two passions, which is education and humor, and taking things that are really complex and making it digestible and understandable and actionable as well. So taking, these really in-depth scientific topics, and hopefully you'll be able to add one or two things in at the end of every episode. So basically, there's going to be a couple of different segments I'm going to try and do every episode. Sometimes I'll have all of the segments, sometimes I'll have none of them, sometimes I'll add in new ones, but today we're going to go over the fun fact of the day while I sip cafe, which is a pretty popular one on my Instagram page. We are going to do a health or hype. So we're going to talk about boosting the immune system and if that is a real thing. And then we're going to do a supplement spotlight. We're going to talk about vitamin D3 because that's pretty pertinent for what's going on right now in the world with all things corona and immune system health. This podcast is going to be mostly me by myself talking, but there might be some guests in the future, hopefully, and we're going to get into it. All right, y'all, it's that time. Fun fact for the day while I sip cafe. And yes, it's 3:22 p.m. and I am sipping cafe. So your fun fact for the day. A new study found that depression symptoms are 3 times higher during the COVID-19 lockdown. And researchers are saying that COVID-19 is a traumatic event. I don't think this is shocking or news-shattering to people, but it is interesting to hear that, depression and mental health issues, all these things that are, big issues on a regular day, are obviously heightened during this time. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that there's a lot of secondary effects of what's happening with COVID right now. Immune system health is a big topic of conversation, but there's a lot of other issues going on with things like anxiety and sleep and mood. And so all of this kind of can sort of build on each other. It's like having that pile of clothing in the corner of your room where it builds and builds and builds, and then eventually it falls over. You have to kind of address all of these things. There's a really famous quote called, "It's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you." And I think that's kind of what's happening right now. We're being so inundated with different kinds of news and media and all this, micro content, and it's making everybody feel really sad. And when I say sad, I mean it more so as stressed, anxious, and depressed, right? And we're having physical manifestations of this. We're maybe feeling more tired, our bodies are sore, we feel mentally fatigued, and we know that the effects of all of this are really cumulative. I talk a lot about your stress bucket, right? And your inflammation bucket and all of these things that are going into our whole system. And over time, if you keep adding stuff to a bucket and you never empty it out, you're going to feel really weighed down and tired. And I think that's what is happening right now. So it's really, really important that we, of course, talk about things like anxiety, which again, that's basically just our reaction to stress. And we know that, stress is not all bad. It's gotten a really bad rap over the years, but anxiety it's not new in this country, right? 40 million Americans deal with anxiety in the US. It's super common. But we know that there's generally a lot of comorbidities with things like anxiety and depression as well. So depression is another one of these things that I think needs to be broken down a bit more. We know that there's different versions of depression, right? Mild, moderate, severe. It's the leading cause of disability worldwide. So it's something that can be a lot more than just what's going on with our mood. It can affect how we, concentrate. It can affect what's going on with our sex drive. It can affect what's going on with our physical body, right? There's actually research that talks about higher levels of these inflammatory molecules and cytokines in our brain, especially if we are having depressive symptoms, overactivation of the amygdala, right? So parts of the brain that deal with emotion. So, it's quite literally a whole body experience. And then we also know that depression, anxiety, and insomnia, right? A lot of these things are really complex and interconnected. So there's a really big link between depression and insomnia and anxiety, which particularly can impair the immune system in a negative way, meaning that if we're not sleeping or if we're super anxious all the time and then we're not going to bed early or getting quality sleep, then that can affect what's going on with how our T cells function and our B cells and natural killer cells. And over time, when we are exposed to a pathogen or virus, our bucket, our stress bucket, our mood bucket, our virus bucket is going to be that much more full, and then we are going to be susceptible. So again, these effects are cumulative. We don't want to think that we never want to have a bad day and we never want to feel sad and we don't want to never experience bad moods. That's not what it is, right? The dose makes the poison. I'm a really big proponent of people understanding that. So we have to understand that we have to control what we can control, and it's all about our averages. So if you have one bad day or one bad thought, you have thousands of other things that are going to pop up that we get another chance to let our hypothalamus know that everything's okay. This is where we need to take extra attention to what's going on with our nervous system. So our central nervous system, our peripheral nervous system, right, which is our fight or flight response. And then, of course, our gut-brain axis. We're not going to get into that too much today, but that definitely plays a role. But what everybody should know is that the nervous system loves homeostasis. It loves balance. It loves to have everything be playing nicely together and getting along. So when these things are not happening or certain areas of our life get out of control, maybe we get a little bit more lax with our diet, maybe we're not sleeping as much, maybe we are more anxious, all of that is going to manifest in different ways. These symptoms of imbalances are going to manifest as maybe a headache, maybe poor mood, maybe poor sleep. So again, we don't always want to just go right to the symptom, right? Or right to the problem of, okay, I'm in a bad mood. Well, what else is going on in our health and our overall immune bucket, our overall stress bucket, our overall inflammation bucket? So really important to take all of that into consideration and say things to yourself like, what are some actionable items that I can do right now? And what are some supportive resources? So that might have to be reading a book, listening to really loud music, calling on a friend, or sometimes just cutting off pro-inflammatory people. It's really important right now that we take a time right now to step back and have a bigger picture approach about what things are contributing to my overall wellness, what things am I consuming, whether that's, again, people, thoughts, media, food, alcohol, supplements, any of these that are not adding to my overall health and wellness goal of living my best life, we might need to cut those out. So again, it's not just one thing. It's going to be cumulative, and the dose makes the poison. Really want people to understand that point. If you are having issues with what's going on with life and you need a little bit of extra help, that's okay, right? This is where things like supplements and botanicals can be really helpful. You can't botanical your way out of pro-inflammatory people, actively participating in things that aren't good for you, being around things that you don't really want to be around, saying yes to things you don't want to do, right? All of that really matters, right? There's not a supplement for that. But there are things that you can use to take to support the nervous system. So nervines, this is going to be really important, particularly for helping to modulate the nervous system response. So again, whether that's our fight or flight response or a parasympathetic response, right? So calming things down, revving things up. These are things that when you feel like you're going to quite literally have a nervous breakdown, or when people are literally getting on your nerves, this can help relax the nervous system. So some things that you maybe want to keep on hand during this time of the year, like, skull cap and kava, wild oat, lemon balm, chamomile, passion flower, California poppy. These are all of my favorite things that can be very helpful that are going to be a little bit more mild. If you are maybe experiencing, again, some secondary effects like pain and stress and anxiety because of your central nervous system being so hopped up on adrenaline, you might need something that's a little bit more of a sedative. So, still in the nervine category, but going to work a little bit harder, maybe work particularly on the adrenal axis, work on those adrenaline levels. So this is where we might need things like California poppy and valerian. Again, if you can't maybe shut your mind off at nighttime, you're having a hard time sleeping. And then even some really heavy hitters like milky oats. So these are going to actually work sometimes on inhibiting brain activity, working on GABA levels. So understanding there's a time and a place for those things. It's not going to be a cure-all, and generally we have to look at some of those other lifestyle pieces first. So that is our piece today on what's going on with mood support and anxiety and kind of, dealing with what we're living in right now, our quote, new norm. So our next section that we're going to be talking about today is health or hype. So a lot of people will say things like, take XYZ to boost your immune system, or this will boost your immune system. And I'm here to tell you that that is a bunch of hype. Number one, we don't necessarily boost our immune system. There are different parts of the immune system that can work more innately or get to the scene of the crime first. And number two, we don't want to always be boosting our immune system all the time. There's a time and a place for that. If you're somebody who already has autoimmune issues or a lot of hyperactivity, excess in the body, you might not want to be hyping things up or boosting things up. And when it comes to the immune system, we know that it is just that. It's an entire team unit. It is an entire system. So we need to manage stress. We need to get movement in. We have to have restorative sleep. We have to have nourishing foods. And we also have to understand that we have to coexist and live with germs forever. So not all of them are bad. Just because we're exposed to one doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to get sick, but we do need to understand how to support a healthy immune response and how to build an innate immune response, how to use different botanicals and supplements for acute needs when you need something effective immediately versus when we need something more long-term. So this is where we have, again, our innate acute immune system, and then we have our adaptive acquired immune system. So that innate immune system, this is that first line of defense. When you get really mucousy, maybe you notice that your stomach issues are kind of kicking up. Maybe you have more tears and mucus, saliva, all this kind of stuff. These are the physical and chemical barriers that pathogens are going to try to get through first. We are born with this innate immune system, right? Then we have our adaptive acquired immune system. That's that second line of defense. These are those specialized immune cells. This is kind of how vaccines can work on some level, right? And so there's very different ways to support both of these. We don't necessarily need to be just focusing on one. I like to think of it as kind of your preseason versus your game day immune system, botanicals, supporting lifestyle factors, all of that. So preseason, right? That's going to be kind of your preventative approach to what we have going on immunity. This is going to be your long-term committed relationship that you are going to be in with your immune system, with taking certain herbs, with taking certain supplements. It's really boring. It's not always sexy. It's not always fun, but it's going to help you stay well in the first place, right? So building up a robust immune response, getting ready for cold and flu season. So every time you're exposed to a germ or a pathogen, you don't have to freak out and live inside. You can say, my body knows how to handle this. Then we have more of our game day acute stuff, right? This is that uh-oh phase. You wake up, you don't feel good. Maybe you've been traveling. Maybe you've been exposed to somebody who's been exposed to something. This is when we do want to have a quick a booster to what's going on with the innate immune response, where phagocytosis is going on, where white blood cells are being excited, where neutrophils are being called to the scene of the crime. So we need to be able to deal with both of these. And again, when we're talking about that acute rapid phase versus the chronic persistent phase, those are very different approaches when we're dealing with how we're going to take certain botanicals and how we're going to take certain supplements. So when we are talking about building our health castle, being the king and queen of your immune system, building that health foundation, right? All of these different analogies that I've talked about in the past. We need to think and ask ourselves first, am I looking to be in a long-term committed relationship with this immune system right now? Or do I need more of a fling? Do I need something that's more short-term? I'm traveling, I've been around somebody, or am I the kind of person that when I get sick, I stay sick all the time, I don't recover quickly. Every time I'm around somebody who even coughs, I get sick. Those are going to be very different protocols. So let's start with the long-term immune relationship stuff. This is going to be our preventative approach. This is going to be things that also can secondarily influence our immune system. So things that can maybe be going on with sleep and stress, anxiety. These are going to be long-term tonics. Adaptogens would fall into this category. So, some of your holy basils, eleuthero, ginseng, ashwagandha. Also, a lot of our mushrooms, a lot of these polysaccharides, right? We actually have these receptors in our GI tract for these polysaccharides that can modulate the immune response. We don't always want to be, again, turning things on all the time, turning it up to level 10. We want to modulate things. So these are things that are going to be really boring, that you're going to take every single day, whether you want to or not, that are going to help build back up that robust immune response when you are exposed to something. These are going to actually help to regulate your T cells, right? And going to help with things like your antibody mediated cells. So things also like your B cells. They help to balance the endocrine and nervous system. So working through the HPA axis, they can work on regulating hormones and immune system responses, cytokine storm, right? All these things that have gotten a lot of press over the years, because we don't want to turn any of these systems off. We want to modulate them and we want to balance them. And again, when we're talking about adaptogens in particular, you should know that we have some more balancing ones, we have some more stimulating ones, and when we have some more sedating ones. So depending on where you fall on that scale, again, if you're somebody who's always super, super excess, super spaz, always go, 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 yeah, you might not want to take something that's going to rev you up even more. So maybe, a ginseng might not be the best route for you, or a rhodiola might not be the best route for you. You might need something that's a bit more balancing, like lemon balm, or like passion flower, or even like American skullcap. So, and then some of those regular long-term adaptogen mushrooms like your reishis and your chagas are going to be good for kind of, again, that long-term approach. And then we have our fast-acting immune stimulants, right, which they don't necessarily work to boost anything, but they can kill things kind of on the spot. So this is something that you're going to take in very heroic doses generally. You're going to take a lot of it for a short period of time to really get your immune system to get its act together. It will increase things like circulating neutrophils. It will excite white blood cells, right? It's going to get those first line responders to the scene of the crime. It's going to increase things like phagocytosis. It's going to actually increase white blood cell division. And then it's going to moderate some of these other chemicals that talk to each other, like cytokines. So again, these cytokines are these cell signaling molecules which go and tell your cells to turn certain things on and certain things off. So this might be more things like your oregano oil, or your wild indigo and your myrrh and your lomatium, right? Where they're going to be more fast acting. So to kind of wrap that up, we want to be in a long-term relationship with some of these preventative botanicals. Echinacea, astragalus, a lot of our mushrooms, a lot of our adaptogens. And then we want to keep those game day short-term fling botanicals in there, like our oregano oil, our myrrh, our wild indigo. So that's how we're going to talk about not necessarily boosting our immune system, but fortifying and strengthening and supporting the immune response. And last but not least, we're going to get into our supplement spotlight. So today we're going to talk about vitamin D3. This is really important, not only for what's going on with Corona and all that's happening with the immune conversation, but also this time of the year, right? So we're dealing with things like seasonal affective disorder, which can affect about 9.7% of the US population. And the further north you go, the higher this number goes. It actually occurs 4 times more often in women than it does in men. So you might notice winter blues, right? We know that melatonin levels can be altered during the winter months as well as serotonin levels. And so, again, the further we live from the equator, the more susceptible we're going to be to this. So, really, it's hard to get vitamin D levels during the summer if you live even somewhere fun and sunny. You have to have about 70% of your skin exposed. It has to be as close to solar noon as possible. It has to be one shade before pink. That's what your skin has to get to. So, there's a lot going on when we're talking about vitamin D getting it through the sun. So vitamin D3 supplementation is going to be really important. Anybody who's followed me for a while knows that daily D has kind of been my thing, and it's, sort of cheeky and fun, but vitamin D is so important because it actually works like a pro-regulatory hormone in the body. It influences over 2,000 different genes. We have vitamin D receptors in everywhere from our brain to our bones. I mean, it does so much. It actually helps to produce over 200 different antimicrobial peptides. So vitamin D is important for most anybody. However, there is some conversation about, do I need to take D2? Do I need to take D3? What's the better option? And so what I tell people is, regardless of the type of vitamin D that you take, what you need to know is that vitamin D is an inactive prohormone. So basically what that means is that when you take it, either way, whether it's D2 or D3, it has to be metabolized to its hormone form. And this happens in a two-step conversion process. So it goes to the liver first, and then it goes to the kidneys. Now, when you look at vitamin D2 and D3, they look molecularly pretty similar. There is a difference in the side chain, and that actually is where the research talks about why there's a different affinity for how we absorb vitamin D2 versus D3. Again, they have to still go through this two-step process. So what the research has found is that vitamin D3 actually has a longer half-life in the body, meaning that it can stay in the body longer. So anywhere between 15 days to up to 10 weeks for it to be completely cleared from the body. Where vitamin D2 can be cleared from the body a lot quicker. Some people say anywhere between 15 hours within up to 3 to 5 days. Best case scenario, we say around 2 weeks. So when we're talking again about the side chain difference in D2 versus D3, we know that the vitamin D2 actually has a lower affinity for these vitamin D receptors. They have a lower affinity for these vitamin D binding proteins. And the liver enzymes that convert vitamin D2 to D3 are less active. And vitamin D2, again, has that shorter lifespan in our blood plasma. So it's not necessarily that vitamin D2 is, quote, bad or worse. It just depends on what's going on with your current vitamin D levels. So we always tell everybody that you want to get your vitamin D levels checked by your doctor. And we want to make sure that if we are having very low levels, that we're probably going to want to take a vitamin D3. So again, vitamin D3 is really great for raising super low levels. Vitamin D2 can be okay if you're trying to maintain current levels, if your blood levels seem okay. Also, vitamin D is very hard to get from the diet. So vitamin D2, the ergocalciferol form, that's where we find things in mushroom and yeast and some fortified foods. They actually put like a UV light on mushrooms. That's how they get it in a supplement form if you're getting a vegan vitamin D2. Where vitamin D3, the cholecalciferol, right, that can come from sunlight and from fatty fish. However, you would have to eat a lot. So I would suggest getting some of your core nutrients in this time of the year. So vitamin D3, there's a lot of good research right now about zinc as well. I always tell people being in a long-term relationship with some of these immune modulating botanicals. So maybe a mushroom botanical could be really good for you. And then thinking about having some of those game day herbs that are necessary for when you wake up and you don't feel good. That's where we maybe want to have things like our oregano oil and our black seed oil on hand. You don't wait until you're bleeding to have a Band-Aid ready, right? You have a Band-Aid ready in your house that you've had this first aid kit for years. So we can start building up our herbal first aid kit as well for things that we might need in the future. So that was a lot for the first episode. We talked about a lot of different topics. I wanted to just recap some little takeaways for everybody in case you want to go back and listen and take some notes. So first things first, we need to understand that we can't necessarily boost our immune system. You can support your immune system. You can build a strong immune response. You can build a resilient immune system. But there are different parts of our immune system, and we don't want to always be boosting everything. So meet yourself where you are in your immune journey and remember that it is an entire system. How you sleep, what you eat, the thoughts you think, the people you surround yourself. Psychoneuroimmunology is a huge field about this, right? That the psychology of what's going on directly affects the physiology, how our body responds. So cutting out pro-inflammatory people and thoughts, dealing with your emotional immune system is going to be super important. Number 2, we want to make sure that we're getting our vitamin D3 levels checked. Make sure that we're taking some of those core nutrients. If you have very low vitamin D levels, vitamin D3 might be better at actually raising your vitamin D levels. And if you have kind of okay levels, then you could maybe be on cruise control with vitamin D2 if you're a vegan and you feel that you don't want to take vitamin D3. And then lastly, we want to control what we can control, right? Assess what contributing factors could be positively or negatively influencing your mood. Since we know there's a lot more mood issues going on, there's a lot more talk around depression, anxiety during this global pandemic that we're living in. So, maybe make a list of some actions that you can take and supportive resources for these different areas that can secondarily affect what's going on with our mood, like anxiety, sleep, dietary pieces, movement, play, rest. And there is definitely a difference between resting and sleep, right? So sometimes, you can have a really tired soul. And again, no supplement or botanical is going to help with that. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was fun and informative. And I'm looking forward to releasing more episodes and going on this health and education journey with y'all. Have a great day. Ciao.